should you buy? And which players should you sell? What's going on, fantasy football fans? It's Mitch back here with another fantasy football buy low, sell high. This time for week 5 of the 2024 fantasy football season. These are the players you need to target. You need to get off your team immediately. Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more fantasy football content just like this. And let me know in the comments any players that you think you should trade or any trade advice that you need at all. I'll be there with an answer. Let's kick off the buy low players with Josh Jacobs. Buy Josh Jacobs, running back of the Green Bay Packers. Why? Well, this is the second week in a row that I have Josh Jacobs inside this video, and there's a reason. I believe in the Green Bay Packers running game, and I believe in the Packers offense with Jordan Love. Luckily, you had one extra week to wait for Josh Jacobs. They just played arguably the best defense in the NFL. They went down 28-0. You know what happens in fantasy football when your running back goes down 28-0? He doesn't run the ball. That's what happens. So you don't get the fantasy points or the fantasy ceiling that you would like. But Josh Jacobs, despite losing Jordan Love for a couple of weeks, despite the game script, still has 3 out of 4 double-digit weeks in PPR formats. But the great thing here is that he hasn't hit his ceiling yet or even close. Now is the time to buy Josh Jacobs because I think for the rest of the season, he's going to be a borderline RB1. There's no competition truly, really in Green Bay. This is going to be a run-heavy, balanced offense with Matt LaFleur calling plays. Josh Jacobs is going to eat in the red zone with one of the highest scoring attacks in football. And once you kind of get over the fact that Jordan Love, yeah, he was paid all that money, that contract, you really look at how he's played so far in the 2 losses that the Packers have had, hasn't played that well. So that might actually persuade Matt LaFleur to run the ball more, and to actually take the ball out of Love's hands and allow him to be complementary to the run game, which is, I think, the best version of the Packers offense. Run heavy, play action heavy, downfield striking offense. So buy Josh Jacobs because his ceiling is coming soon. And people probably don't realize it. The next buy is Joe Mixon of the Houston Texans. Mixon has been out of action the last couple of weeks. This is a perfect opportunity to buy. If the owner that has Joe Mixon is not in a good spot because Joe Mixon has been injured, then he's probably desperate. He's probably wanting to make a deal. He's wanting to make a trade. He's wanting to mix up his team. So offer him something. Mixon had an incredible week 1. He looked phenomenal. He's still really good at football. Yeah, he's coming off an injury, but what we learned in week 1 was that Mixon was going to be a workhorse for one of the best offenses, most explosive attacks in football in the Houston Texans. Since he's been injured, we've learned about how Cam Akers and anybody else getting the football in that Texan backfield doesn't even come close to Joe Mixon. So there's really no reason, given how the Texans have produced on the ground since week 1, that the Texans would be persuaded to not give the ball 20 times a game to Joe Mixon. He's going to eat in the red zone. He's going to be a 3-down back, and he's going to probably see 15 to 20 carries a game. So Mixon for the rest of the year, as long as he stays healthy, which granted is not 100% certain or even close, but if he does stay healthy, he's going to be a great asset to your team. A locked and loaded starter every week, no matter the matchup. You don't even have to deal with it. You don't have to worry about it. A really talented player in a really talented offense with a good passing game that takes pressure off him because he doesn't see loaded boxes, and he's also a red zone weapon. So Mixon is a great trade because he's probably on teams that are 1-3 or at best 2-2. They're desperate. They want to make a move, and they're probably not even that excited because they're worried that he's going to get hurt again. So take advantage of that. Next up, we have Zay Flowers. Buy Zay Flowers, wide receiver of the Baltimore Ravens. Why? Well, Lamar Jackson these last 2 weeks, and the Ravens specifically, have had very few passing attempts. And the reason for that is the game script. They've been playing from ahead against the Bills, the Cowboys, and they've been riding the Derrick Henry train. But the thing is, the NFL season doesn't work like that. You're not just going to run the ball playing from 24-0 every game, right? You're going to have to be in competitive games. You're going to have to be in game scripts where you're trailing and coming from behind, and you're going to have to throw the ball. And I just don't see the Ravens being this run heavy in every game for the rest of the year. So, just logically, Zay Flowers being the number one receiver on the Ravens, and you really think about it, who else do the Ravens really have right now? Like Rashad Bateman is inconsistent. Nelson Aguilar is a one-trick pony down the field. Mark Andrews is washed. And Isaiah Likely, they don't really trust him for some reason. He doesn't play the amount of snaps that Zay does. Zay is always out there. So I just see volume increasing significantly. The first 2 weeks, he was pretty good, especially in terms of volume and targets and receptions. Week 2, he had a great game. Weeks 3 and 4, 15 and 18 attempts for the offense. Very run-heavy script, which meant not a lot of Zay Flowers. But moving forward, expect more Zay Flowers. He would be a great wide receiver 3 on your fantasy team, maybe even at times wide receiver 2 worthy, especially in PPR. So check him out. Try to buy Zay on the low. Next, a quarterback to buy low is once again Brock Purdy. I brought him up last week, but I'm underlining it. I'm underlining it because Brock Purdy is a buy. Right now, Brock Purdy is playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He followed up a great performance in a loss against the Rams with arguably an even better performance against the Patriots in a win in which on one drive, he threw 3 touchdowns on one drive. 2 of them were called back, and then he still threw a touchdown to George Kittle. Here's the thing about Brock Purdy right now. He had 30-plus touchdowns last year as a passer. This year so far, he only has 5 touchdowns in 4 games, which is abnormal for the 49ers. That's not typical. This guy has a chance, I think, by the end of the year to have 30 touchdowns. So there's going to be games where he throws 3, he throws 4. There's going to be those games coming up. They've rarely kind of happened so far. But if you're actually watching the Niners, they're increasing their pass happiness. Kyle Shanahan trusts Brock Purdy to throw the ball. 30 attempts is not out of the ordinary right now for the 49ers offense, especially when you consider they don't have McCaffrey right now. He's actually like a reason to throw the ball more. So if they get McCaffrey, that's a reason to throw it more because he's such a good receiver. Jawan Jennings, they know how good he is now, so that adds to the mix. If they didn't know that already, George Kittle is there, healthy again. Debo's there, healthy again. Brandon Ayuk still getting his feet under him, getting in better shape. That helps. And Ricky Pearsall will be back soon. So there's going to be more reason to throw the ball with McCaffrey, Pearsall, all these guys returning to health, plus, the other guys being healthy like Debo and Kittle. Purdy is playing really, really well. He's thrown for the highest yards per attempt in football last year and this year, but there's a key difference. This year, he's actually 31st in yards from after the catch. So his yak is second to last in the NFL. And if you know anything about football and Kyle Shanahan, you know that that is backwards because the Niners typically lead the NFL in yak. So that is very abnormal because Brandon Ayuk is playing sluggish. Debo Samuel has been injured. Kittle has been injured and McCaffrey is not playing right now. That's the reason their yak is so low. But imagine if Purdy is throwing the ball down the field as he is right now, but also getting more yards after catch on those underneath dump-offs. So to me, Purdy is going to absolutely explode for the rest of the season. He's had 3 280-yard games already, 280-yard games. In this NFL, that is not insignificant, right? Like 3 out of 4 games with 280 yards. He just needs those touchdowns, and he needs a little bit more yak, and he'll be lights out for fantasy football purposes. And the final buy low is a tight end. I'm going with Jake Ferguson from the Dallas Cowboys. Brandon Cooks has a little bit of a knee problem, potentially a knee infection, which will keep him out for a while. That is the other option in the offense besides CeeDee Lamb, right? When you talk about the Cowboys passing depth chart, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Jake Ferguson, and it's Brandon Cooks, and then maybe Jalen Tolbert, right? Now, with Brandon Cooks potentially removed from that situation, Ferguson is going to get even more looks than he's already getting. He's had 13 catches the last 2 weeks. He's one of the most heavily targeted and trusted tight ends in football. He's actually sneaky pretty darn good at football, and Dak loves him. Plus, the Cowboys defense right now is in a bad way. They don't have Micah Parsons. They don't have DeMarcus Lawrence. Their secondary is trash. Like, this team is going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to come from behind. And we saw that game against the Ravens where Ferguson and the Cowboys were trailing, and Ferguson put up a ton of catches. So if you can somehow get Ferguson on your team, I think you're getting a reliable every week player at an extremely inconsistent position. He's not thought of the way that Laporta, McBride, Kelsey, these guys are thought of, but he probably will have similar production by the end of the year. And I wouldn't be shocked if he led all tight ends in catches by the end of the season, because like I said, a lot of volume from the Cowboys passing attack, regardless of the game script, but truly if they are trailing, you could see 40, 50 attempts on the regular. On top of that, he is clearly the number 2 option in this passing attack now that Brandon Cooks is injured. So those are my buy lows entering week 5. You want those guys before they pop off. Next up, let's talk about the guys that you should be trading before week 5. First, a sell high is Dallas Goedert. I want to transition from tight end to tight end because Dallas Goedert right now, who I brought up last week, is still the tight end 1 in fantasy. And he won't remain the tight end 1 in fantasy. A.J. Brown will come back. Devontae Smith will come back. And if you pay attention to Dallas Goedert's production with those players on the field, he only had 13 fantasy points in the first 2 weeks with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Since then, he's been lights out. But if you can somehow get someone to buy into Dallas Goedert as a legit league-winning top 5, top 6 tight end, because honestly, he is very talented. He's a good football player. But the problem is that the Eagles have Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, too many mouths to feed for Jalen Hurts. And with those players back on the field, that's going to take Goedert's game from super consistent and effective and number 1 tight end quality to, can I trust them in my lineup? So, like, I don't really want to be buying into a player or even holding a player that I know is probably going to be unreliable when those other players around him come back. So I'd rather capitalize now and get somebody else to buy in on that notion that he's going to be somehow reliable, even though he never really is when those players are on the field. The next sell might be a little bold. We talked about Brock Purdy. I would actually sell Jordan Mason if I had the chance. I have Jordan Mason in a league because I drafted Christian McCaffrey. And my idea here, and this is just from a personal take of my team with Jordan Mason, so I think that's, pretty relatable here if you have Jordan Mason. This is what I'm thinking, right? So I have McCaffrey. I'm thinking McCaffrey will come back at some point. Now, this is different if you don't have McCaffrey, right? If you have McCaffrey, this is reason to trade Mason, in my opinion. If you don't have McCaffrey and you have Mason, it might be a little bit different, but it's still probably still efficient, right? So basically the idea is that I'm trying to trade Jordan Mason as an elite running back right now every week for another elite running back or maybe an elite receiver depending on how your team looks. If you have a great depth chart at running back, then sure, go for it. Go for a receiver, right? Go for an elite option at receiver and trade Mason for that receiver. But if you have, let's say, 2 reliable running backs that you start every week like me, where I have McCaffrey, I have Kyron Williams on my team, then I would look to maybe just swap Mason for another running back. Because once McCaffrey comes back, Mason doesn't become as reliable or nearly as good in fantasy. He becomes pretty much on the bench. McCaffrey replaces his production and probably is a bonus on top of his production. And I do believe that McCaffrey will come back. And even if McCaffrey doesn't come back and you traded Mason for nothing, which some people in your league might believe, you'll still be trading for an elite player, preferably at running back, but if not, at receiver, with an already deep running back room that you already have, right? So my idea is, let's swap Mason, maybe even pay up a little bit. Like, let's put Mason with a receiver, like a wide receiver 2, and let's try to get Saquon. You know what I mean? Let's try to get an elite option at that running back position. Let's trade Mason, maybe straight up. You could probably trade him for Kyron, or you could probably trade him for James Cook, or you could probably trade him for, maybe you would have to add somebody, get Derrick Henry, something like that, right? So just field some offers, see what happens at running back, try to go for another elite guy because you know you're getting McCaffrey back. Or in the other case, you will at least have an elite running back for Mason, right? So basically what you're doing is targeting a team that needs that production right now, probably at the lower end of your league. They might be 0-4. They might be 1-3. Maybe you can even target somebody that has been a little inconsistent, like Breece Hall, and you could try to swap Jordan Mason for Breece Hall. Maybe you add another player on top of that to make it comfortable for that owner. But you understand what I'm saying? Try to take that Mason, the reliability, the consistency of what he's produced so far this season, give it to an owner that needs that, swap it for another running back or an elite option at receiver, and bring McCaffrey back to your lineup and profit. So try to sell Mason if you can. That's all I'm saying. Because I think eventually, maybe in a month, McCaffrey will be back. 6 weeks, he'll be back. And eventually, this will help you in the long run. So I'm throwing that out there. Next, sell Aaron Jones. I would sell Aaron Jones for no other reason than the fact that he always gets hurt. I don't know if I've ever seen a season in which Aaron Jones has played every game. I don't remember the last time that happened, to be honest with you. So Aaron Jones has been very good for fantasy. 3 17-plus point weeks. And he's still very good at football. If you've watched the Vikings, you've noticed his explosiveness, his lateral agility is still there, his breakaway speed is still there, his every down ability is still there. He's still very good, okay? But there's 2 things going here. First of all, he's an older back that will wear down as the season goes on. So regardless of whether he gets hurt or not, he's probably going to be a lesser player by December, which is where you need him at his best because it's fantasy playoff time, right? That's just a fact. Second, the Vikings will probably never have more value than right now. Like, the Vikings could be a good team for the rest of the year, but right now people, including myself, are putting them the top 3 of their power rankings, maybe number 1, number 2. Like, are the Vikings going to be the best team or the second best team in football for the rest of the season? Probably not. They might not even be the first or second best team in their own division for the rest of the season. So Vikings are at their peak. Aaron Jones is at his peak physically as a player, and his injury situation that he always has doesn't make him reliable or trustworthy. So I'd try to get something else for Aaron Jones right now and try to sell him high. He's a great player right now. He's producing like an RB1, RB7 in PPR. So try to get him and move him for something that's worth that, right? Then we're going to sell Terry McLaurin for similar reasons. Not for injury issues, because McLaurin is typically very healthy, but because the Commanders are at the peak of their value as well. They're 3-1, and their offense looks historic. They look like the 07 Patriots. Are they going to be playing like Randy Moss and Tom Brady for the rest of the season? Probably not, right? Probably not. It's a rookie quarterback. There's a rookie wall. It's a real thing. Plus, they just played arguably like the 2 worst defenses in the league right now. Like, the Bengals defense can't stop a nosebleed. And the other defense they played, the Cardinals, are the least talented on paper in the NFL. So they've played very advantageous matchups. Terry McLaurin has benefited from that. He had an 18 and 20 point week in PPR. But if you look at week 1 and week 2, he actually struggled a lot. So what has changed, right? I think he had like 11 combined points in the first 2 weeks. And then he has a 20-pointer and an 18-pointer. What changed? Try to sell Terry McLaurin before it's too late, because the Commanders are going to regress as an offense, and that will impact McLaurin. Lastly, our final sell entering week 5 is bold. It's crazy, but with the true intent of selling high, you have to sell Derrick Henry. I know. Now, it's fine if you want to hold Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry is a sell. The first 2 weeks, he had 26 combined points. And then against the Cowboys and the Bills, 2 defenses that are not good against the run, specifically from a personnel standpoint, are smaller. And the Ravens were able to swallow them up and run them over and just outpower them. A specific matchup from that design right there. Derrick Henry went off for 30 and 35. So just with the idea of week 1 and 2, he was good. He was maybe an RB1, a back-end RB1, but not this juggernaut winning me weeks. Derrick Henry could now be swapped for another elite running back that's more consistent. maybe has a higher floor in reception totals. Maybe for a receiver, that's really awesome, that people believe in, but maybe not as much as people think. Like, you could probably sell Derrick Henry for Nico Collins right now. I wouldn't be shocked. You could probably sell him for Malik Neighbors, right? Like, elite options at wide receiver. Maybe not Justin Jefferson, but definitely probably Breece Hall. You could probably put him in a trade for Saquon, who I think probably has a higher floor. There are other options out there that I think might be better overall than Derrick Henry. He is older. Again, he's in an offense that has barely thrown the ball because of game script the last couple of weeks. He is a running back that doesn't catch the ball very much, so he does have that floor removed from his game. And then on top of that, like, is he going to replicate this stretch for the rest of the year? Yeah, like, no. Like, not even, he's not going to put up 30 a week, you know? So if you can trade him to the guy that you just hammered with Derrick Henry on your team, that probably saw his score last week and saw him destroy his team, then that's probably the best way to go, because you could probably get an elite option at receiver or another elite running back, or, you know, maybe even like a better trade, like a 2-for-2, where you give up a weaker player that you want to sell with Derrick Henry, and you actually maybe get a same level running back as Henry, but then an upgrade at receiver, something like that, right? So Henry, to me, just by definition, is a sell high, because he's just been so unreal the last 2 weeks and pretty pedestrian in the first 2. So Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. It's Mitch. That is your week 5 sell high, buy low. Peace.